Good morning again. You are looking at a live shot of Dragon on top of Falcon out at our launch facility at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Now we're just 20 minutes away from the live launch of CRS-10 to the International Space Station for our attempt number 2. So welcome and thanks for joining us. My name is Brian, back here again at the headquarters. Now we had a few minor issues that we worked through yesterday in the launch, but remember, it is always better to attend to everything that you need to for a safe launch, even if it delays a day, than to risk anything the day of. So that's exactly what we've done. Now we, as we said, are honored to have the opportunity to fly out of 39A for the first time as a company today. 39 was home for the Apollo moon missions, where a man stepped foot on top of the moon for the first time, having launched from pad 39A. It then became the home for the space shuttle missions, where again, we launched with some of the first pieces that what would become the ISS from this pad. And here we are 30 years later with the same opportunity to again deliver cargo up to the International Space Station. We're also going to be attempting another landing of the first stage back at landing zone 1. It's during the daytime, so we should get some pretty tremendous views with an exciting program ahead. Let's get started.
Good morning, this is Tom Prodario from the avionics department here at SpaceX, and as you heard, we are launching from historic pad 39A at Cape Canaveral, Florida. Now, this launch pad is just about a mile or so away from our other launch site, which is Space Launch Complex 40. However, that's in the Cape Canaveral Air Force Base. This is just across the channel at Kennedy Space Center, which is owned by NASA. So SpaceX leased this launch pad from NASA just a few years ago, and we've been slowly modifying it to support our Falcon 9 architecture. Now, this may be just a little bit of review for those of you who tuned in yesterday for the launch attempts, but bear with me while I just describe the basic things that are going on the screen here. The big white tube shrouded in liquid oxygen bleed-off right here is the Falcon 9 rocket. This is the structure that's going to space today. The Falcon 9 rocket has 3 main parts. Most of the bottom of the rocket is the first stage. That's this big section here. On top of that is the second stage, and then right at the very top, that's the Dragon spacecraft and its trunk. So this entire rocket is launching just to bring this very, very tiny tip of the rocket into space, and that's where we're carrying all those supplies for the International Space Station. There are a few other things going on the screen here too. First of all, there's this big kind of gray squarish structure behind the rocket. That's called the fixed service structure. This is a structure that dates back to the Apollo era. This is what the Apollo moon astronauts used to ascend to get to the very top of their Saturn V rocket before blasting off to the moon. And hopefully we'll be doing the same thing with some SpaceX astronauts for our crewed Dragon missions coming up very soon. The other big hunk of metal over here is the rotating service structure. This dates to the shuttle era when they used to roll it around. This entire thing is on wheels. It would roll and rotate and clamp on the top of the space shuttle so they could load secure payloads into the payload bay. We're not using that structure right now. And then finally, this last white thin structure is the transporter erector. This is going to tilt back from the rocket just a few seconds before liftoff and allow it to clear and take the tower. So while we're getting closer to liftoff, follow along with the mission progress bar in the very bottom of the screen and the mission countdown timer in the top right-hand corner.
Hi, I'm Kate Tice, and I'm a process improvement engineer, and I'm standing just in front of our Merlin engine assembly area. We have a crowd going around us because everybody's really excited for our mission today. Falcon 9 will be heading to low Earth orbit to tag up with the International Space Station, which you may hear us refer to as the ISS throughout our webcast today. The ISS orbits our home planet at about 250 miles above us, and that's about the distance from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia. So if you happen to be thinking to yourself, geez, that doesn't sound that far, you're right, the space station is actually visible to the naked eye. Most of you might know this, but for our younger or newer space fans watching today, when the ISS passes above you at night and the solar panels reflect sunlight, it actually looks like a very slow shooting star in the night sky. A simple Google search can tell you when the next visible passes will be in your area, and if you happen to see it within the next 2 days, be sure to look for the faint light that's chasing the ISS. That's our Dragon playing catch-up to the station. Going up in Dragon this morning is about 5,500 pounds of cargo, which varies from research experiments to astronaut food and exercise equipment. Now, the experiments being done up there aren't just for astronauts of future missions to Mars and beyond. It also benefits those of us that stayed down here. For example, life on Mars is tough because there's little protection from the sun's harmful radiation. Earth, however, has sunblock built in, the ozone layer. It sits about 10 to 30 miles above the Earth's surface, and it shields all forms of life from solar radiation. The International Space Station has a unique vantage point to our ozone layer. And in fact, if you've seen videos of the ISS coasting over Earth, you've probably caught a glimpse of that unique vantage point. Now, one of the experiments on board Dragon today aims to take advantage of that. It's the Stratospheric Aerosol and Gas Experiment 3 ISS, also known as SAGE 3, and it's an instrument that will be mounted on the exterior of the station to scan the horizon line and collect data about the ozone fluctuations in this protective layer.
Good morning, everybody. I'm John Federspiel, a lead mechanical design engineer here at SpaceX, and it truly is an honor again to be here with you to share this inaugural launch from Kennedy Space Center, Pad 39A, for our 10th Commercial Resupply Services mission. Now, if you were tuned in yesterday, you saw that we aborted our mission at the T-minus 13-second mark due to an issue with our second stage TVC actuators, TVC being thrust vector control. What these actuators actually do is they gimbal the engine on the second stage. The second stage only has one engine, and we use these actuators to point the second stage engine and allow us to do pitch and yaw control. So as you come up, that's what we use to target those precision orbits that we need to attain. Now, we saw an issue with our backup portion of the thrust vector control system. Our primary set of the system was looking okay. However, out of an abundance of caution, we did opt to scrub the launch yesterday to replace the entire thrust vector control actuator. And today we proceeded to go through a bunch of testing this morning. Our team performed a bunch of wiggle tests where they basically actuate the second stage engine, and the response we saw from both the primary and backup were exactly as we were expected. So as of this moment in time, we are tracking no issues at the moment. If you were out at the pad, you saw there was some rain, some precipitation coming down. That rainstorm has cleared. We're literally threading a needle in some clouds at this moment, but there should be no constraints to weather, range, Dragon, or Falcon 9 for today's launch window. It is an instantaneous launch window, so if there were any issues, we would be scrubbed and our backup would be on Tuesday. But for now, as I mentioned already, Falcon, Dragon, and Kennedy Space Center, everything is, all systems are go for today's launch.
Now, you've heard us refer to this mission today as CRS-10, and all the CRS missions before that were named numerically in the same way. The CRS stands for Commercial Resupply Services, and that's the intent of every single one of these primary missions. It's to bring supplies to the International Space Station. Now, Dragon can carry supplies in two main sections. The one that you're seeing on your screen right now, that bottom circular opening, is called the trunk of Dragon. That is an unpressurized section because it is exposed to the near vacuum of space. It's very, very low pressure. That can accommodate larger payloads, and we'll talk about specifically what's in there more in a bit. The other section is the capsule. That's the top portion of Dragon. It has the slanted sides. You see astronauts there inside of the pressure section of Dragon. And the reason we call it the pressure section or the capsule is because it is the environment of Earth. It has atmospheric pressure. There's 14.7 psi in there. There's air. So if you're a customer who wants to send a payload on Dragon to resupply the space station and it needs atmospheric conditions, you put it inside the pressure section. We have polar and glacier bags in there. Those are slots that, as their names describe, provide cold environments. Polar is a refrigerator, essentially, and glacier goes all the way down to cryogenic temperatures, actually. So if you have a biological experiment or something that requires extremely frigid temperatures, that's what glacier can provide. Now, as we mentioned yesterday, there's also the Merlin slot. The M in that stands for microgravity. So if you want to do some experiment that doesn't need gravity, you put it in there. Now back to the trunk, the unpressurized section for a moment. Kate mentioned SAGE, Stratospheric Aerosol and Gas Experiments. That is taking up two of the slots in the trunk. The third is a big Space Cube experiment that's going to do a lot of stuff like lightning imagery. Some of it's going to do studies on the impingement of thrusters for approaching vehicles as they come near the space station. So lots of cool cargo in the trunk, lots of cool cargo on the full extent of Dragon that's going up to the space station today.
So for most of our viewers, you probably aren't immediately familiar with Launch Pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center, but for some of you, the memory of that mid-July morning in 1969 is likely still crystal clear. On that day, 39A was home to a rocket that stood 6 stories taller than the Statue of Liberty. On board that rocket were 3 American astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin. When the countdown finally reached 0, the rocket known as the Saturn V slowly began its ascent, clearing the towers of Launch Pad 39A and beginning its long and historic journey towards the moon. The Apollo 11 mission represents one of the greatest accomplishments of the American space program, and it all began at Launch Pad 39A. Of course, that wasn't the end of the story for this launch site. Following the Apollo era, the iconic space shuttle blasted off a total of 53 times from Pad 39A between the years 1981 and 2011. Today, we are just moments away from the very first Falcon 9 launch at 39A at Kennedy Space Center, and Falcon 9 will be carrying the Dragon spacecraft filled with nearly 5,500 pounds of supplies and science to the International Space Station, just as the shuttle did in years past. With a long history of supporting America's space program, Launchpad 39A will once again be the starting point for the historic firsts in crewed space flights, such as SpaceX Dragon missions carrying NASA astronauts to the ISS. In the future, 39A will also be the launch site for some of SpaceX's first missions to Mars. Now, before we're able to get there, we will have to make some modifications to the launch site, including some work done to the rotating service structure. Now, yesterday we came so close to lifting off from this historic launch pad. We're very much looking forward to seeing it lift off later today and bringing this hallowed piece of ground roaring back to life. For more information, let's take a look at a video from our Director of Launch Ops, John Murator.
Hi, I'm John Murator. I'm the Director of Launch Operations here at Pad 39A. We got the keys to Pad 39A from NASA on April 14th, 2014, and we started a really radical transformation of this pad. One of the biggest things you notice right away is the big hangar we built, because we use horizontal integration for the rocket. And the other big thing that we've done is we've had to convert the pad from what's called a mobile launcher pad concept, where the rocket's assembled on a pad, or the space shuttle as it was at the time, and rolled here with all of its support equipment, to a situation where the pad is sitting on the flame trench, and we just move the rocket to it, lift, and get ready to launch. So when you walk on the ground here, this is pretty legendary ground. It is where humans first left to circle the moon, and then eventually the humans first left to stand on the moon's surface. It's a place where the very first space shuttle took off, and over 80% of the space shuttle flights took off from this pad. So it's pretty legendary. And the size of it is what's amazing. 39A is our home for a lot of different activities for SpaceX. It's a home for Falcon 9s, but we launch those out of Vandenberg and over on the Cape Canaveral side. It's going to be our first home for Falcon Heavy. We're going to launch lots of missions there. 39A is where Americans are going to return to space, launching from American soil. And we're going to launch American crew members on the Dragon on top of the Falcon 9 single core. What's pretty exciting about this place is this place gives SpaceX room to grow. We can put some amazing big rockets on this pad because it's a huge facility, and we're pretty excited about what this is going to bear for the future of SpaceX.
It's T-minus 6 minutes and 15 seconds at Kennedy Space Center for our inaugural launch of Dragon for its 10th Commercial Resupply Services mission. Right now, we have just begun chilling in the Merlin engines on the first stage. That's where you start to see the cold gaseous oxygen, liquid oxygen, bleeding off of the aft end of the first stage. That's the process where we start flowing that liquid oxygen into the engines. That's because we don't want them to flash into gaseous oxygen at liftoff. That could potentially damage your engines. So instead, we flow in and we get all of the actual engine itself to be the cryogenic temperatures of the densified liquid oxygen. After that point in time, we continue to do our checks across the vehicle. We have one more wiggle check coming up in that second stage to verify that the actuators are still functional and performing as we expect. So far, no issues there to report. Dragon also transitioned to internal power about 2 minutes ago. That team is looking A-OK there as well. No issues to report on the Dragon front. As I mentioned before, if you tuned in yesterday, we do have a new strongback that is supporting the structure. That's the structure to the left of the rocket there. That strongback, or transporter erector, if you've watched our webcast in the past, would pull away around this point in time, about a 70-degree angle. We've opted for a more robust retraction method with today's launch, and instead of pulling away at that at this earlier point, the strongback itself will retract right at liftoff. So you'll see the Falcon 9 actually lift off from the pad, and then the strongback will fall away from the pad. Now, as I mentioned again, it is an instantaneous launch window, so if there are any issues, we would be scrubbed for the day. But for now, all systems are go from Kennedy Space Center.
Just a few minutes after the Falcon 9 lifts off from Pad 39A, it will be returning to land at Landing Zone 1. Landing Zone 1 is an old launch pad at Cape Canaveral Air Force Base that SpaceX has transitioned into a landing pad for receiving first stages. Now, SpaceX has the ability to land on either Landing Zone 1 or our autonomous spaceport drone ship fleet, but there are advantages and disadvantages to each type of landing, and we select the most appropriate one based on the type of mission. For example, the most obvious thing about landing on land, the most obvious advantage, is that the land doesn't move around on you when you're trying to land. It's much easier to bring a rocket back down onto solid ground than it is onto the deck of a drone ship. We also have better timing constraints for a land landing. We don't have to deploy the drone ship and wait for it to get onto position. And then once the rocket is back, we can just dispatch our crews out to take care of it, safe it, and then refurbish it for rapid reusability, which is our ultimate goal here at SpaceX. However, the autonomous spaceport drone ship also gives us some operational flexibility that's appropriate for certain types of missions. For example, the autonomous spaceport drone ship can catch the rocket as it finishes its parabolic arc out into the ocean. Normally, for a land landing, we'd have to expend a little bit of fuel to burn it back towards the landing pad. This extra saved fuel allows us to tweak the last bit of performance out of the Falcon 9 and gives us just a little bit of an edge. So we're getting real close to liftoff here. We are going to turn over to the pad cameras now, and for the final few minutes coming up to liftoff, we're going to let the Falcon 9 rocket speak for itself.
Stage 1 lock secured. In-bag fuel bleed complete, and igniter bridges are complete. Strong back secure for launch, 88.5 degrees. Stage 2 lock secured.
T-minus 2 minutes.
And Falcon 9 is on internal power. M1D fuel bleed is complete. Falcon 9 is in self-align. Stage 1 and Stage 2 cryogenic secured for flight.
FTS operator, verify AFTS is ready for launch.
AFTS is ready for launch.
VCDC, verify Falcon 9 and Dragon are in startup.
Falcon 9's in startup.
Dragon is in startup.
Stage 1 and Stage 2 resting for flight.
LD, verify go for launch.
LD verifies go for launch.
T-minus 30. T-minus 20.
Falcon 9's configured for flight.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff.
1
And Falcon 9 is on its way to delivering Dragon for its 10th commercial release resupply services mission. This is the first time a launch vehicle has left Earth from 39A since the Space Shuttle Atlantis in 2011. Everything continues to proceed nominally. We are just about to transition through Max Q, maximum aerodynamic pressure. That's right after we pass supersonic. Max Q is one of the highest stress states on the rocket. Right after this, we're going to be proceeding into kicking over for our inertial pitch. That's where Dragon is going to start going on an orbital trajectory. Everything continuing to look nominally for today's launch. You'll continue to hear the operators call out various power and communication system performance as well as propulsion. So you can see the aft. Now what you are seeing is a view from the inside of the second stage. You have main engine cutoff with stage separation. And we have a second stage engine start. You can see the first stage is on its way back for its first maneuver burn. It will have a 3-burn process, the entry burn coming up. Or the boost back burn, sorry. Meanwhile, the second stage is continuing to perform nominally. It's got a 6-minute burn. The first stage burn continuing to proceed nominally. This boost back burn will go on for about another 10 seconds.
So as you just saw, we had a successful main engine cutoff, a successful stage separation, and then a successful second engine start. It was a little cloudy for the Falcon 9 coming off the pad, so we didn't get a great view of it, but it looks like we have a fantastic view of the second stage engine nozzle and the surface of the Earth right now.
Yeah, so you guys probably saw it as we did. I don't know about you, but I got chills seeing the booster fall away from from the engine and just kind of glide back towards Earth and rotating. Like, great shot.
Now, there are 3 different burns to get back to landing zone 1. There's the boost back burn, which successfully completed. Then there's the re-entry burn, which is to slow us down as we go back through the atmosphere. And then there's the ever-exciting landing burn as we approach landing zone 1.
You actually just saw the grid fins on the first stage pop out right there. We use those to dynamically steer the vehicle as it comes back down using air resistance as it passes through supersonic airstreams to get it back towards the landing zone 1 at Cape Canaveral.
Yeah, so a lot of really exciting stuff going on right now. We are watching the first stage booster come back down to Earth. It will be going through a series of burns like Brian said, but primary mission is still going well. Dragon on top of second stage making its way to the International Space Station.
A quick note about those grid fins. People always ask us, how do they exert such a large force on such a large cylindrical body? And it's the same principle. If you stick your hand outside of a car when you're going 10 miles per hour on neighborhood streets, it doesn't affect you very much. But if you stick your hand outside when you're going 80 miles per hour on the freeway, you can exert a very, very large force upon a large surface simply from the air particles. The grid fins are doing the exact same thing. They're little airplane wings that are steering us back to landing zone 1.
Now, given the cloud conditions at the pad, it doesn't look like we're going to have great video of the first stage coming down from the pad, but we do have a crystal clear video link with the first stage, and just like last landing, I think we're going to have great video all the way back down.
Yeah, so just in case if you're joining us right now, we had a cloudy but successful liftoff of Falcon 9 from Launch Pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. We're watching the booster come back down. The stages have separated. Dragon is on its way to the International Space Station, and just wow, that view is incredible.
Yeah, you might be seeing bursts on your screen. Those are actually our cold gas thrusters helping to steer the vehicle as well. We have the grid fins, which act as wings of it. We also have nitrogen, that we have cold gas, and we spew those to exert small forces to help us laterally as well. So we'll kick it back into JFED, who will give us an update on everything that's going to occur in the next few moments.
about 6 minutes into the count right now, everything continuing to proceed, and nominally you can see that first stage is guiding back to Earth. It's coming up for its entry burn. That's the second of the 3 burns. That entry burn should kick in about 15 seconds, 15 or 20 seconds from now. You'll see the engine ignition. We just deployed the grid fins. You saw those earlier as well. That means we're coming back into the atmosphere, and we use those for coming back to Earth. You can also see all the clouds we're about to head through as we come back to Earth. That's why you didn't see as great a video on the way up, and we had to show you an animation. It was because we did go through the clouds. That call out was confirmation that the ignition did just occur. You can see it there on your screen. A slight delay on the video feed, but you will hear the call outs as they come up. This burn itself is going to last for about 15 seconds, and it has just shut down. Looks to be good right there. And then we have a landing burn coming up in about a minute from now. That landing burn lasting just to touchdown for about 30 seconds. So you're going to see it come right into landing zone 1, stage 1 there. Meanwhile, on your right side of your screen, you can see stage 2. The stage 2 burn is going to last for about another 2 minutes. Continues to perform very well. That stage 2 engine has pretty deep throttle capability. It can go from about 81,000 pounds to 210,000 pounds. That's how we target that precision orbit. We put in a parking orbit of 200 by 600 kilometers. That's all good there. Meanwhile, stage 1 is transonic right now, transitioning through the speed of sound as it's coming back to Earth, and everything is looking good to go.
Okay, so you've got some footage there of the booster as it comes back down. We're waiting for the landing burn to begin very soon. It was cloudy on takeoff, so we are expecting some clouds as we re-enter. So we really hope to be able to bring some really good footage as it comes back down to landing zone 1, which is on ground. It's not one of our drone ships.
And you can see it descending there with the landing zone in the background. It's amazing to think of what's happening. That is coming back from space with live footage. It is approaching the landing zone now.
Landing
You're
legs
seeing
up.
on the screen, the landing legs deployed. As it softly touches down successfully on LZ-1. Congratulations, Falcon.
The Falcon has landed once again, landing zone 1.
So it looks like the clouds are just beginning to break there, making for a pretty picture-perfect landing. No video from the ground like we expected earlier, but we did get great video all the way down. So right now, the second stage looks like it's also proceeding normally. The primary mission today is, of course, to bring the Dragon to the International Space Station, and by all accounts, it looks like it's going very well right now.
Yeah, so over the next few moments, what's going to come up, second stage is still attached to Dragon, so they're going to continue for a moment. Dragon will deploy its nose cone, that aerodynamic shield that it keeps to move through air efficiently. It will deploy that because once it's out in space, it doesn't need that mass. Then eventually Dragon will separate from second stage and will continue on its phasing up to the International Space Station.
Exactly. During that time, we will also see things like the deployment of the solar arrays from the trunk section, which Brian mentioned earlier in our webcast, that is the unpressurized section of the Dragon capsule.
Now, the Dragon doesn't just go straight to the International Space Station. It actually slowly approaches over a series of days. So we won't actually be getting there today, but once Dragon separates from the International Space Station, it will be slowly executing a series of burn maneuvers, getting it closer and closer. And we actually just got confirmation that we have a good orbit for second stage.
And that's wonderful news. Now, in order to get to the International Space Station, we go through what we call a series of phases. We don't just go diagonally up to the International Space Station. We do a series of movements away from the center of the Earth and a series of movements in co-elliptic orbits around the Earth. And those are appropriately named height adjust burns and co-elliptic burns.
As we mentioned earlier, there is a safe zone around the International Space Station, so it's not like we can send it up with thrusters going. It's a very controlled movement, very tiny impulses to steer the Dragon, in which, when it gets close enough, the Canadarm, which is one of the funnest things to say, I think, will reach out and catch Dragon by the tail.
So it looks like we just had a successful deployment of the Dragon. You can see it on the right-hand side of your screen right there. This is a view from the second stage of the rocket looking up towards the Dragon, and you can see it in the trunk there. It looks like we had a successful deploy. That's very good news.
That's fantastic news. So second stage actually burns a second time. It burned its first time to get Dragon to where it wanted to deploy, then it actually burns a second time after Dragon has separated, and that's the deorbit second stage. Instead of letting it continue on its natural trajectory that it's on right now, we intend to deorbit into a specific location. So we burn second time, SES-2 and SEGO-2, second engine start, second engine cutoff, to put it exactly where we want to land.
Yeah, so just in case if you've tuned in just recently, we had a great liftoff from launch pad 39A, which of course most of you might recognize as the Apollo 11 and Space Shuttle launch pad. So we had a great liftoff from there. We had a successful landing of Falcon back at landing zone 1 on ground, and then we had a wonderful visual confirmation of the separation of Dragon from second stage.
So we're actually going to take it back up to John and get an update on how the Dragon is doing.
We are just about 11 minutes into today's mission at this moment. Everything looking nominally. You heard before already that we had a nominal orbital insertion. Lot to be happy about that. Our Falcon put Dragon in a perfect parking orbit. As we get ready for 2 days of maneuvers, height adjust, and co-elliptic burns to get us to the space station. On the right side of your screen, you're seeing an image inside the solar array fairings. What happens is Dragon actually pops out some solar rays behind some fairings. On ascent, we use these for charging the batteries so we can begin our on-orbit operations. Now, Dragon does carry 4 large batteries on board. These batteries, however, do not last enough for the 2 days that we have to get to the space station, so we use the solar rays to charge those batteries and keep the spacecraft functioning. We are berthing with the space station on the 20th, about 9 a.m. Eastern time. So that will be coming up at that point in time, 22nd, sorry, the 22nd we're going to be berthing with the space station with the hatch ingress soon after that. Shane Kimbrough and Thomas Bisquette will be opening Dragon, will be actually doing the berthing operations, then opening shortly thereafter. Now what Dragon actually has to do and why we're kind of holding on here for a second as you're seeing the inside of the vehicle is Dragon has to prime the thrusters before and make sure the prop system works functionally. And then as you can see right there, the solar rays themselves are going to come out. And that is a beautiful sight always to see, that those solar rays will unfurl. Those solar rays contained attached to the trunk themselves, one on either side, and kind of in the middle of your screen, towards the bottom middle of the screen, you can see the hinge that they are connected to the trunk, and that's actually how we rotate the solar rays about the trunk and use our pointing operations to charge the batteries that I mentioned before. You're actually looking at the back side of the solar rays. That's actually the solar array wiring as we do the interconnects to the modules, and that's the other side of the solar array. You can see kind of the cresting of the Earth in the bottom as well. So for now, everything continues to look nominally, proceed nominally on orbit. No issues to report from Dragon. At this moment, we are in a perfect orbit, as good as you could hope at this moment. Everything on Dragon continuing to look good. And you saw as well that first stage landed back at landing zone 1 for our first daytime landing. That was a beautiful sight as well for sure today. So everything here is looking good. So let's check back in downstairs with the rest of our team.
Awesome. So with successful solar array deploy, we now have the ability to recharge Dragon. A few important milestones come up next. We prime the propulsion system so that we can actually start those maneuvers, those height adjust and co-elliptic burns that we mentioned earlier. And then we open the G&C bay door so our sensors can have access to space, they can detect stars, and we can know exactly where we are. And then we start our phasing up to the International Space Station. So it's been a wonderful day so far. To recap everything that happened, we had a nominal liftoff from one of the most historic pads in space history, from 39A. We had nominal second stage and nominal Dragon. Dragon is now continuing this on its own. And then as our secondary mission, we had a successful landing back at LZ-1. A tremendously humbling opportunity for all of us here at SpaceX to be a part of those hallowed grounds.
So with that, we're going to be bringing this webcast to a close. We'd like to thank NASA, our customer, and whom we're bringing supplies to the International Space Station for. We'd like to thank the Range at Kennedy Space Center, and also you, the viewers, for sticking with us 2 early mornings in a row to watch this thing get off.
Very early mornings for those of us in California. Be sure to check out our social media outlets like Facebook. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, as you probably know. We will be having updates also on SpaceX.com regarding Dragon mission and its progress to the International Space Station over the next 2 days. Finally, if you have any interest in joining us here at the SpaceX team, we actually have a posting specifically for a full stack enterprise software engineer. And if that sounds of interest to you, text 77453 and text SpaceX to 77453 and get you a link on the way, and hopefully you will join us here at the team.
Thank you.